Welcome to Concept to Culture with Studio House of Kalaa. It is a moment of complete privilege for me to have architect Thomas Abraham with us. To give you all a little context, I have worked for Idea World Design College since I've graduated. And I think it's really shaped me to be who I am. The very fact that I'm sitting here today to be able to have a conversation with Sir today is a moment of complete privilege. The topic we will be dwelling into is foundations of thought, shaping culture through architecture and education. So I'll first and foremost get started with handing over this moment to architect Thomas and asking you to, if you had to introduce yourself to the world, how would you do it? Because that honestly is a very tough job because of the number of things you're doing. So how would you want to tell our audience a little about yourself?
Okay, I think all of us, before we define ourselves by profession, I think we should define ourselves by who we are as human beings. And I hope when my eulogy is eventually written one day, I will be known as a guy with a big heart. You understand, right? And hopefully a mind to match somewhere. You understand, right? And actions that reflect both. That's what I okay. Now coming back to more, in my opinion, more mundane stuff. I'm an architect, yes, okay, and I also run a design, couple of design institutions, a couple of education ventures. One is Idea World Design College, where Pooja you used to work with us, and besides that, I also run another venture called Giraffe, which trains people for to become engineers, doctors, architects, etc. Right. Furthermore, I also paint. Okay, I do some artwork. Okay, and in fact I've exhibited even at the art one of the subsidiary shows at Art Basel Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And I also mentor my students and my interns to also design, do fashion. You know, so right, okay, and yeah, and I think some of those fashion events, sorry, fashion couture, we have used everything from Miss Universe, Miss World, Miss India, and I was on the Cannes red carpet last year. But above all, I hope I'm a devoted husband and a doting dad. Okay, so I think that our relationships define who we really are, because that is what makes human beings there. I would rather be a collaborative person rather than a competitive one,
Mm-hmm.
because having said that, it's also important that in a collaborative effort, somebody should lead the way. Understand, right? Okay, and I hope as an entrepreneur and as an educationist and as a thinker or designer, I hope I'm also doing that. Okay, leading the way so that people who are with me, not behind me, not following me, people who are with me also may be able to see through the prism and lens that I see. So that's it.
100%. I think this is a full package, and I think a small little introduction is not enough to do justice for the kind of journey you've had. But I
Yeah.
think first I'd want to sort of understand what first really drew you to the field of architecture. I also feel that was your starting point to
Yeah.
everything that you
Okay.
do in some sense.
No, the funny thing is, you know what? Lot of things in life are serendipitous. Okay, I use more common word. You can call it luck. You can call it God's grace. Whatever you want to do it. I used to be a school topper throughout my school days. My favorite subject was physics, and next was math. Yep. And for me, the go-to thing was I wanted to be the next Isaac Newton. Okay, that is my thing. All right, that is I was that much in love with physics. What happened in my school library? Suddenly in 11th standard, I saw some books. I think it was placed by the U.S. Information Service or something, right? Okay, okay, in my library, and they had books on film, books on art, books on architecture, and they're big coffee table books, thin but beautifully produced, lovely color. And for the first time, I realized there's a whole world out there in the art and design field which was totally unknown to me. Do you understand,
Right.
right? Okay. And I imagine this is among thousands of books in the library, but just somehow stood it, and I didn't realize till then how much of a visual person I was. You understand, right? Okay. Just for a small, not a caveat, a small aside. Okay. Just before this call, I was actually talking to somebody in Spain who wants to make a movie. Right. Okay. And he wants me on board for that. You understand, right? Okay. So yeah, I don't. And these are things that remain probably the back of my mind, or you call it the subconscious, whatever you want to call it, for decades, and comes into fruition sometime. In but you never know when it actually blossoms. Some of these seeds take a long time to germinate. You understand, right? Okay. And so those architecture books where I saw Falling Water and Farnsworth House, and I think I just like a gap. Okay. But having said that, I still loved physics. I enjoyed IIT Kharagpur, and I took up aeronautical engineering and architecture. In IIT first. Yeah, that's because because I'm a romantic at heart, and I'm a little. I'm not. You'd say I have a whimsical side to me, which I think is interesting and playful, but it's good. Because as a kid, I always want to be a pilot. Like almost every 6-year-old kid wants to be a pilot, right? Okay. But I realized I can't be a pilot because at the age of 17, 18, I developed a little bit of short sight. The pilot career was out of it. So I thought when I joined IIT, I'll become an aeronautical engineer. But except that I realized that after joining IIT aeronautical engineering, I realized that aeronautical engineers don't do any flying at all. They just make drawings of planes. And be honest, to be an aeronautical engineer, probably the best place is either Europe or the US. Okay, because almost no other country designs planes. So, and I wanted to stay back in India. Okay, my dad had inculcated one strong streak of patriotism in me. Okay, especially because he said you're going to IIT, and IIT spent a lot of money on you guys. Okay, and you at least owe it to the nation to at least pay it back. Okay, so let's see, if I'm an aeronautical engineer, the only way I can make something is go to NASA or Airbus or Boeing or whatever. So India doesn't really have okay. So then moving heaven and earth, after 2 months, I shift my thing from aeronautical engineering to architecture. And no, and funny thing is, you know what? Okay, by the way, I grew up abroad. I didn't grow up in India. I grew up abroad. I came to India. It was a culture shock for me because I didn't. And IIT Kharagpur is not in a city. It's actually nothing but a hamlet. It's got an IIT and a railway station. Nothing else. You understand, right? It is a, it is how do I say it? It is a rural setting, and I grew up in an air conditioned environment. It's not super rich, middle class, but by Indian standards, reasonable level. For me, it was a culture shock. So much of a culture shock that it drove me into the IIT Kharagpur library for the first 1 year of my life. And guess what? It was harrowing for me that time. Okay, because I had very few friends, and the library was my refuge, so to speak. And there in the IIT library, I rediscovered not just architecture. I mean, in fact, almost everything I learned about architecture, I learned in the library in that first year. Okay. I discovered English poetry. In school we taught poetry till 8th standard, 7th standard. You just it's forced down your throat, and I know I had this rebellious streak in me. So anything that's forced down my throat, I would just I'm not interested. Okay, but I discovered literature, I discovered art, I discovered architecture, all from my solitary confinement, so to speak, in the library of IIT Kharagpur. Okay, so the funny thing is, you never know what in life that seems like an obstruction or like a mountain too high to climb. You often when you reach the top of that mountain, when you reach, you'll see that below that is a far more verdant pasture, and that climb is probably worth it because initially at the bottom of the mountain it looks like too big. That 1 year, the first year at IIT Kharagpur, and maybe my 1 year in the school library there in my school days, they impacted my life probably more than any others, intellectually speaking, professionally. Okay. And then after that, what I did in IIT for the next 4 years or in college was practically just a redo of what I practically picked up in that first year in the library there. Okay. And it made me the person I am. Okay. Today I write books, I do art, I do architecture, of course, as you know, and I do fashion, among other things. So that's a lot of stuff on my plate, right? And almost everything was germinated in those first couple of years when I was 17, 18 years old. So
Which is largely has been formative years to build you as a
yes,
personality,
absolutely. Yes, yeah,
right?
exactly. Your personality is formed, exactly. The
Yeah.
person I am was formed that time. Absolutely.
So I think something that I want to sort of get into, because you come from a setup where you stayed abroad and you came into India. So there is
Yeah.
a lot of cultural significance. There is impact of the culture, which you
Yeah.
carry with you. So I think
Absolutely.
today, especially, you've taken on the role of an educator, which is a huge responsibility. I've also
True that.
seen the impact it's had on students we've taught, right?
True that.
So what was the reason of you in this trajectory of your understanding to say, okay, I want to take on the role of an educator? I also know you do practice, but what was
Yeah.
that middle ground you met and said, I want to do a little of both and more in your case?
Okay. Again, it's rarely that you drive to destination. Often your destination just draws you. You know, right? Okay. We have a big 5 year, 10 year plan in our heads. Okay. But often you never know. You get blindsided by where life literally takes you. Okay. I initially took up okay. So let me just tell you. So I finished my architecture in IIT Kanpur, came down to Bangalore, worked with Sanjay Moheb, one of the most respected architects in the country, without a doubt. Okay, and I was probably his worst employee ever. The very fact that he didn't throw me out will ensure him a place in heaven. He's that good a guy, okay? Because I was atrocious, mainly because throughout my life, I've been very entrepreneurial. I've never been the kind of guy who can fit into a system. I can lead. Yes, I can lead a system thing. But if even if I play football, I'd either be captain or I'll be goalkeeper. I can practically play no other role. That's the way I am. Okay. Either goalkeeper's role is very important because even if you don't win, you can't lose. And if you lose, it's almost always the goalkeeper's fault. One day I decided, boss, if I'm going to continue like this for rest, I'll probably become old and stagnant, staying there for the rest of my life. So one day I just decided to quit. Just one day quit. I had no projects, no money, nothing. And I said sometimes hunger is the best driver. Okay. Okay. And then to get some amount of income, okay, I started working part-time in an institution which doesn't exist anymore, teaching interior design. Part-time. Right. And I remember I was very young. I was how much, 21 years old. Before the class started, I was also sitting among the students because students also my age, many are older than me, some around my age. So they thought I was another student. I sat there and then the class was started 4 p.m. I get up from my bench where the students sit and then go into the front of the classroom and I'm not prepared. But you know what? The next 2 hours it just came out. And I didn't even know I had that gift. I really did not even know that. It just came out so well. Believe me, that first year was probably my best years as an educator. I just loved it. I loved it so much. Again, I got worried because in India, if you think that if you're becoming a teacher, that's because you're not good enough to practice. So again, I quit after 1 year. Okay, it's not that's
That's
true,
the
of course.
notion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You're not a good designer or architect, so that's probably why you're teaching design or architecture, right? Okay. So I said, oh, boss, this is not happening, and I'm loving this too much, and I quit one day. And I get a small office, around 350 square feet, small office. One afternoon, I have a steel chair and I have a steel table. You have seen this folding steel chair and table? Literally, that's all I have. That's exactly what I have. A steel chair and a steel table. That's all I could afford because architects don't get paid very well, by the way. Okay, right? Okay. So one afternoon, I had nothing much to do. I put my head on the table and I'm keep almost dozing off. When a couple of my ex-students, but within the institution where I taught, they walked in and said, "Sir, I understand that you have left the institution, okay? But we have told some of our friends to go and join the institution and to specifically ask for your particular batch." I said, "Yeah, but I've quit. I don't know." They said, "Tony, you know what you do? We will get you students in this 350 square feet place, okay? Why don't you start an institution right here?" I said, "Here, right here?" I said, "Yeah, we'll get a few students." So that first year, I hired some furniture. I had no money to buy it. I hired a furniture. The only blackboard I could afford was, this rolling type. You seen a rolling type blackboard they used in village? Okay, that's all I could afford. And I had space only for that much. So rolling type blackboard. I hired some furniture and I hand printed some stencils or some things, stuck it all over the city wherever I could. My ex-students got me some 5 students. Another 8 students I got from my this efforts. I literally sticking all of that. Personally, I went this day. I had no staff, nobody. It was just me. I didn't even have a phone. Really, that it was that bad. But that first year, I got 13 students, 1-3, and the rest is, so to speak, history. Because the first year, my confidence grew. I said, okay, I can, and I'm not doing so badly financially compared to what I was earlier. And then I realized that I'm getting more inquiries than my space could accommodate. 13 students could accommodate. So I hired a classroom in a college called St. Joseph's in the heart of the city. But except that there, the problem was that I could only have batches after the college is finished, which means only after 4. So 4 to 8, I had 2 batches. And one day, for some looking like inconsequential reason, the principal told us, guys, you need to vacate from here day after tomorrow. Literally in the middle of the academic year. I was like, I thought the world has ended again. I said, what the heck, God? I mean, why does it always have to be on the brink? Why always lead me to the edge of the precipice? But guess what? Another serendipitous is a good thing. Guess why? Because I had to quit that place and I had 2 days to quit. It's in the middle of the academic year. I ran around and I found a commercial space in a commercial building, which I would had to pay some minimal amount of rent, not much. But the advantage in commercial buildings, I could also have batches in the daytime. In college, I was constrained only 4 to 8, right? Because that's all the college could. Now, because I was forced out of the St. John's College, I had to hire a commercial building where I was paying rent anyway for the full day, right? I mean, throughout the month. So I could suddenly have batches in the daytime. And that's how, in fact, we started a daytime batches at Idea. You understand, right?
Okay.
And to this day, have grown. No, we all have mostly daytime batches. We don't even have those 4 to 8 batches anymore.
Right.
That's the thing. You never know. But adversities, almost every adversity can be an opportunity if you take that opportunity. You can whine and sit in a corner and think you're a victim. That's one way to do it. Yes, beat your chest and raise your fist against God and say, why? Okay. Or you can say, bro, I think this is an opportunity for me. Okay. I think this is something that I can probably mold. It looks like a clump of clay. I can probably mold and make something probably beautiful and productive out of it. So it's, I think it's a life lesson for everybody, because every time when we hit a so-called blind wall, we think that's the end of the road. Actually, no, maybe that's not the way you should probably be going in the first place. Maybe you should just take a diversion and probably turn elsewhere. Find greener pastures.
No, 100%. And I think this is so inspiring. To be honest, this is the first time I'm hearing your entire journey, in a dialogue like this. I think we live today in a world of instant gratification, especially
Yeah,
our
of course.
generation. Everything is instant. Instamart, Instagram, everything is instant, right? So listening to uh, your story, it really talks about trusting the process. And
Yeah,
this is
true.
really a message that I want you to leave your students with, right? Because I do see that with the generations, resilience is sort of dropping. I'm not saying it's a right or a wrong thing, it's for whatever reasons. But
Mm.
what is it that you want to? I see them quitting at the smallest of things. My portfolio didn't turn out perfect. Everyone's chasing that perfection. So, from your journey, what is that message you want to tell all your 18, 19-year-olds who are forming themselves?
Okay, well, in fact, you must chase perfection. First of all, don't be satisfied with the mediocre,
Mm.
with the I'll manage, or in fact, never settle. I'm using the term which I think OnePlus uses. Okay, it's their byline. Okay, never
Mm-hmm.
settle. Always look for excellence at all times in practically everything. But problem is, no perfection comes in an instant. And in fact, never happens that way. Okay,
Yeah.
it will be a hustle. Believe me, you're gonna have to hustle, guys. And even in a relationship, nothing's easy, bro. If you think that marriages are made in heaven and you're going to put a ring on somebody's finger and you're going to live happily for the rest of your life, you have another thing coming. No, everything takes a lot of work. Yes, in fact, that's exactly why a lot of relationships don't work in our times also, because people just don't want to put in the work. It
Work.
is
Yeah.
work, and I can understand why, because work is stressful. But
Mm.
ironic, by not putting in the work, the stress that comes from whatever you're doing not working out is much worse. The
Mm-hmm.
stress of failure is much worse than the stress of hard work. You understand, right? Okay, so at least for that sake, if nothing else. And secondly, I think we all owe it to ourselves and whoever put us here to that we be the best version of ourselves, or to use a Lincoln term, the better angels of ourselves. You understand,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we are all given gifts. Every one of us given gifts. It could be your familial background, it could be education you have, it could be your looks, it could be your stamina, it could be a lot of things. And I think it's incumbent on each of us, because a lot of people don't have those same gifts. There are probably people who weep because they don't have the same gifts you have. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incumbent on each person to use whatever gifts that you have been given to the best of his ability. You may not always reach the pinnacle, but you always aim for the pinnacle, okay, at all times, okay, at all times, and everything. If I want to be a dad, I want to be the best dad ever, ever.
Mm.
Not the best
Mm.
dad in my building, not the best dad in my locality, no best dad, because I owe it to that little one who comes in, who's come into my home from heaven, so to speak. Okay, so I owe it to him. It is incumbent on all of us to be the better version, including the way you groom yourself. Everything matters.
Right.
Small things matter, because everything matters, because they all make an impact and they all reflection of your personality. Do not just go for the lowest hanging fruit, because the fruits are probably the higher branches are probably sweeter. It's more hard work to get there, but believe me, and the advantages, nobody's often fighting for those fruits on the top. That's
Yeah.
why the giraffe will never go extinct. Because when all the other four-legged mammals are fighting for the foliage on the lower levels, the giraffe is bliss, because he has no competition, because all the leaves of the highest trees is only for
For
him,
him.
and he will never have to go extinct. So, by the way, the other institution where I run, where I do classes for as a prep school, is actually called Giraffe, because the
Mm-hmm.
byline is reach higher.
Mm-hmm.
Reach higher, guys. Okay, even if it means you have to stretch a bit, reach higher.
Right.
So I think instant gratification, yeah, believe me, by the way, postponement of gratification is actually one of the insignia of high intelligence, by the way.
Mm.
In fact, you actually lower your IQ every time you go for the easiest
Way
path.
out.
Yes, because as to say, as to quote, in fact, Jesus of all people said, "The road to hell is wide and easy, but the
Mm-hmm.
road to success or heaven is narrow. Take the narrow road. It's not easy, okay? But believe me, the fruit is far more sweeter. Okay, doing that. Okay. So that's it.
So, considering you said the word success, I'm just very curious to know how would you define this? How would you define success? Because you've gone through all trails of life, right?
Yeah.
So, how would you sort of word what success is today in 2025?
Okay. See, okay. Let me put it this way. We all charter a certain plan, a certain map for a life, for our lives. In my opinion, if you reach at least a substantial portion of where you would like to be 10 years from now or 20 years from now, whatever, in my book, I would think that you have been successful because that's what you ought to, or you set out to aim.
Right.
That was your focus. And if you've reached as close to focus as you could have been, and I think you've been successful. It could be maybe you want to become the richest man on the earth, you want to beat Elon Musk. Good for you. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it because you want to be the next Shah Rukh Khan. Good for you. But also let's just also before we set on all these things, ask yourself what among these different goals are worth sacrificing your life for. That's exactly what we do, by the way. Okay.
Yeah.
Is being the richest man something you're sacrificing your life for? Is being the next Shah Rukh Khan? Yeah, absolutely, you may. But let's face it, guys. There is this Socrates term called "know thyself."
Mm.
It's a first axiom, so to speak, of Western philosophy. Know yourself. First, be honest with yourself. Okay, be honest with yourself. Okay, ask yourself, realistically speaking, is it possible for you to be the next Virat Kohli? Is it possible for you to be the next Messi? Okay, maybe if you are talented enough to be a good critic, good for you. But you can live in a fool's paradise also. Be very very clear on that, and that is just a recipe for disaster because you really have no hope of climbing that thing because you don't have the skills, you don't have the tools for it. So then your uh, focus or aim, okay, should be based on the talents and gifts that you are given. You understand, right? And in my book, in fact, that's what the Bhagavad Gita said for the matter. It's your duty to fulfill your destiny. Do you understand, right? And your destiny is predetermined by the gifts and talents that you are imbibed with probably at birth and subsequent to birth. And it's your duty, by the way. It's your farz, it's your dharma. It's not something that you have a choice about. I'm going to give you a small story about there were three servants. The master of the servants actually was going to a faraway place. He gives to the first servant, he gives him one gold coin, one talent. Those are talent. A gold coin is called a talent. To the second one, he gives three gold coins, and the third he gives five gold coins. And then the master goes to a far country and comes back after a couple of years. So the third servant, he said, I took your five gold coins, I invested it. Okay, I made it 10 gold coins, and he gives the 10 gold coins to master. The master is very happy. The second guy said, I took you three gold coins. I bought a field and I planted it and I made the three gold coins. I made it into five gold coins. Master is very happy. But the first guy was given one gold coin. What does he do? He said, I know you're a very hard taskmaster and I was afraid that I would probably lose your gold coin. So what I do, I took it, buried it under the ground, and so that when you come, I can give it back. Who's the master going to be most happy with and most unhappy with? God gives each of us certain gifts. And that gives is not so that when you die, you give it back to him exactly as it's a seed. You need to water, germinate, gestate that seed so it becomes a fruit-bearing tree. You understand, right? Because one day somebody will ask you, bro, I gave you these things. What was it for? Just to put in a showcase and be buried with you or be cremated with you? No. It is so that you can multiply that. It is something that you invest, so to speak, so you can multiply, so it'll benefit not only you, but hopefully benefit the world around you. At least the people around your sphere of influence. So that's exactly the point. I think we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our creator. And I think this is a common theme practically, whether you're an atheist, whether Hindu, Muslim, Christian, everybody believes these things. And it's commonsensical. And I think the purpose of your life is to use the talents that are given to the best of your ability. And fulfilling that purpose gives your life meaning. You understand? Now the purpose of the life is to use the talents that you've been given. And I use the word talents, not just genes. It's genes and opportunities and everything, your pedigree, everything, okay? To use the best of your ability. And when you fulfill that purpose, your life gets meaning. And only then your life has meaning. Because your life lived without meaning, you're living like a beast on the field. You're not even human. We need to get up in the morning for something that we want to do, something special we want to do that morning. You understand, right? So when you go back, hopefully, to sleep that night, okay, this is something that happened that's probably for the good. At least to the best of my ability, so to speak. So in my sense, so success is primarily determined that way. You define where your goal is, and if you have scored that goal, good for you. You won the match. It's as simple as this.
Okay. The reason I asked you to define success is because when we see Thomas Abraham today, you are a very well established individual, more than anything, right? Not just an architect, but an entrepreneur and so many things. But this was to also tell the world that it's not always the final output. It's that process that's gotten you into, right? And the reason I was doing this is because I want more people to hear that and to say that you are chasing perfection, yes, but There is a lot of power in the hurdles you've gone through, in the failures that have pinched you, the losses you've had, the griefs that you've, survived through. I think that is
Pooja,
something which we need
Pooja,
to done.
Pooja, Pooja. I want to die with my boots on when I'm 110. And I literally mean that. Okay. I literally mean that. Okay. I mean, so keep yourself healthy, keep yourself mentally and emotionally and physically healthy to be able to do that. Okay. And yet, remember that I don't want to stagnate and decay. I really
Mm,
want, but there is so much to be done. We are
right?
given one existence on planet Earth, one. Okay. And you better make the best of it. And I know. And yeah. And by the way, trust me on this, it's never gonna come, it's never gonna fall in lap. And unfortunately, most people who have things fall into your lap, you know what they do? They squander it away. They
Mm,
say almost everybody who's won a lottery has actually turned out
lost all.
unhappier and lost all of it, exactly, than when they didn't win it. Okay, because it comes too easy.
Yeah.
So that's also true. Unfortunately, a lot of people inherit all the wealth. Because on that, people like us who have to, who get the basic seat, that's valuable. There's no doubt. Thank your stars that you got those basic seat that you have. Unfortunately, people don't get the basic seat. To build on that is what makes it. Now I understand why Bill Gates will tell, I want to give my kids only 5% of my wealth. 95% I want to give to a charity. Because if you give them 100% of it, they have no reason to wake up in the morning. You
Right.
understand, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they know. So that 5% you give a kid is, of course, Bill Gates 5% still a lot of money. But but having said that, it also gives his kids. He owes it to his kids to give them less,
Right.
so that they become full human beings, humans by themselves, men and women by
Mm-hmm.
themselves,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just living the shadow of their fathers.
Yeah.
So or their brothers.
So I think, so something that this question is now for all the educators out there, including me, everyone who's learning. I'm not saying an educator should always be somebody who's standing in front of a few students and talking. It could be an educator in their own way. What
Yes.
do you think? How do you sort of nurture critical thinking today in the world where everything is so accessible through a tap? That would be one part of my question. And the other one would sort of be, how are we sort of choosing to have some non negotiables with our principals when we come forth to teach, to educate?
Okay.
So, this would be my question. Yeah.
Can you repeat the second part of the question? The non-negotiables, manner, like meaning of
Non
what?
negotiables with your principals as an educator. This is very
Okay.
subjective, of course, but maybe you can share what your non
So
negotiables
just
as an
the
educator would be.
first part of second part is what are non negotiables when it comes to being a teacher, and the first part is how can you be a better teacher? Is that the
Yeah.
really gist of
Yes.
how can you be a better
The
teacher?
gist of it would be that.
Somebody said this once. Okay, in the New Testament, okay, there are what is called four gospels. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Okay, but the real thing that actually makes people want to follow you or believe what you believe is in the fifth gospel. You know what is the fifth gospel? Your life, your example. It's
Mm,
not in the written books or scripture or whatever. Your life should be an example. So, as the first and foremost, as an educator, you should be above blame first.
mm,
You should practice what you preach
mm,
first. That's very, very important. If I'm going to teach design, I better be a bloody good designer myself. That's very good because kids will get inspired by the fact that this guy is not just speaking, he's walking the talk. You understand? That's very, very important as educators. Be a very good example because you are inevitably going to be a role model. And
mm,
hopefully, a good role model. That's true whether you're a parent or whether you're a football captain or whether you are a teacher of any kind.
mhm,
You need to be an excellent role model yourself, both in your professional and your personal life. You should be blemishless as much as possible. We are human, of course. We will have blemish. So blemish as much as possible. People are going to look at you and learn from that. Okay. Second thing, guys, there's a reason why in Indian culture the Brahmin was considered the highest caste. I don't want to go into the goods and bads of caste, but there is a reason for that. The reason is because a teacher's job was considered so imperative
mm,
that society ascribed him. He didn't have much wealth. He did not have much armies. He did not have money like the Vaishyas, nothing. But it was so important that they gave him the most important place in society. And that is
mhm.
true even not just in Indian society, even in, let's say, Plato said, the best state is where the philosopher is the king. Which means that means the thinker is the thing. You understand, right? Okay? So there is a reason for that because you are not just imparting knowledge, you
Yeah.
are literally changing lives.
Yeah.
You're literally changing lives. So and take that seriously, guys. Do not look upon it as a 9 to 5 job or that you log out of once you do your biometric and get out of class. Remember this: you are in to use a Latin term in locus parentis, which basically means in place of the parent, in location of the parent. You are literally in location of the parent at that, which means you are a parent. So your responsibility. That's a big word, by the way. Okay, you have a power as a teacher. Okay, but there's a responsibility that comes with it. Okay, it's there the Spider-Man movie with great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. Okay, but that's also comes from Voltaire, who already said it, and which also by the way is a biblical theme. Okay, to whom much is given, much is expected. You have response. So as a teacher, believe me, your role is very very important because doctors save lives, engineers build bridges, roads, everything. They all improve the quality of life. But you
Yeah.
guys change it because you are effectively a quasi parent when you're in the classroom, and your kids are going to look at it. You know,
Right.
just like a parent who smokes cannot tell his kid, "Beta, don't smoke." That's like the kid will think, "What a hypocrite!" No, this makes it so absurd, right? Same story. So you need to take that very very seriously, knowing that your teachers may not be the highest paid people in the profession, but they're probably the most impactful. Okay,
Mm.
this is the most impactful because your job is irreplaceable. Even if there's AI, even if there are other tools, the faculty or whatever you call it is extremely important. And what is non-negotiable is do your job with teachers should do first as a teacher himself, do your job with passion. Okay, when I say that, see, people don't understand the word passion does not mean excitement and adrenaline. The word actual passion, you know what the original meaning of the word passion is? Yeah, I mean, you should love it so much it should hurt if your loved one is far away. That much. That's what the word passion actually means. That it literally means suffering, by the way. So do it in such a way that you would do anything to see that your your kids gets the best available. And if that is non-negotiable from your end, maybe many, not all, but a lot of your kids will see the same passion and
Yeah.
they will follow you. You will be the Pied Piper of Hamlet who will actually lead your kids to a better place. Hopefully not drown them like in the original fable, but you'll take them to a better place. So that and if you can convey that passion and the passion will be conveyed in the way you behave in class, the kind of input you're going to put. If you're the kind of teacher who the minute the bell rings, you're out of there. Trust me, your kids are going to behave in exactly the same way. And the problem is that will impact their values, their work ethic, not only for the time when they're in your class, probably their work ethic for a lifetime. They grew up seeing their so-called role models being bindas, so to speak, for want of a better word. You're just being
Yeah.
like, well, lackadaisical, no, not very excited about their job. Okay. On the other
Mm-hmm.
hand, they see the work ethic in the parents and the teachers, etc. That work ethic will carry forward for the rest of their lives. No? And will make them, to use a more colloquial meaning of the word winner, it'll make them winners, at least in professional life. So I think that's a non-negotiable.
Yes. Yes.
Put your kids first, okay? Always. As an education, that's important. Remember
Would
that.
that also mean, sir, that it begins with really self-work? Self-work is, I feel,
Yes. Yes,
it's
yes, yes.
not
Absolutely.
about, it's, I also feel teaching is not a switch on, switch off button. I can't come
Yeah,
into
true
class
that.
and say, okay, you know what, I teach 1 hour, leave. No, I think it's a
Yeah,
holistic development. How much work am I doing outside of class, right?
true
To
that.
be able to be holistic, I feel
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
word in some
you're
sense.
absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you. I'm totally in thing because this is not a 9 to 5 job.
Mm,
Maybe you may be in class only for that 1 hour period or whatever.
correct.
But your kids need to know that you have their back. They can depend on you, so lean on you, so to speak. You understand? In a
Mm-hmm.
sense,
Mm-hmm.
okay. At least as far as the subject is concerned, and sometimes even as friend and counselor. But no, that's to the best of your ability. You may not be a trained psychologist or whatever, but we
Yeah.
have enough human intuition to know what
Mm,
is reasonably good.
yeah. Yeah.
Except for the most extreme cases. Most of us, just like parents, will know what is best for the kids to large extent, probably even more than psychologists. Okay, you should know what is good for your kids because you see them day in and day out. A psychologist will see them in that 1 hour sitting when he's on the couch, when
Right.
you're on the couch. Okay, but a parent or teacher will see them much more. You see them through the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the winters and summers, and then you know exactly how each one of us are made different, and each one have our own idiosyncrasies and pitfalls, and hopefully that, and then so you can, and if you genuinely are concerned about your kids,
Mm-hmm.
it'll come naturally. It's not even
Yeah.
something that you have to wear that man. Look, at today I'm going to be a concerned teacher. No, no. I mean, I'm going to use this throwaway word. People use it. If you love your job, the word love is so misused, so I'm very reluctant to use it because people, okay. But if you love your job, you will love your kids also, in the sense that because you are actually going to be there for them. You understand, right? Okay. So and people can sense that love. Pets can sense it. If you love a pet, even if you're seeing it first time, they can actually sense it. Kids can sense it. Okay. So same thing, they can make people can make out what is fake and people at least sense what's fake and what's not. Okay. If you genuinely have it in your heart, if you have them have their welfare in your heart, okay, believe me, most people reciprocate. Most people reciprocate. Okay. And it helps them for a lifetime. That's a big deal. You might finish your class and go off this year, but believe me, if you have been a good role model, somebody they look up to, and you hear it all the time. You hear it all the time. In fact, since you mentioned, I was talking to Shah Rukh Khan, since you mentioned his name earlier. He was saying he studied, I think, in some famous school in Bombay, I think a convent school. He said some father was, was his teacher. He said he was his role model. A father, not, I mean, like a priest, not like you have in St. Joseph's. Okay, he was a role model. Not that the father ever acted in a movie. No, no chance. But the point is, how can a movie star have a priest as a role model? You understand, right? So maybe the inculcation of values, inculcation of work ethic, inculcation of what is important in life. So how the person has molded him. So that makes a big difference. So you could your kid could be Adani's son. You could be just a middle class teacher, but you could have big impact on that guy. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you for mentioning this. I think we need to hear this so much more, that there is so much more to just a job, right? Which you
Yes,
sort of
yes.
very well articulated. So I think we're almost at the end of our conversation, but something that I'm very intrigued and I want to ask you, because you're a designer, architect, what is the importance of being whimsical? Because you mentioned this. I feel there is a little bit of that we do need. A Yeah. little bit of extremity, a little bit of everything, right? A little bit of madness to create. So what's your take on this? The funny thing is, I'm going to, I don't want to give names, but it's somebody you know very well who's also a teacher in our institution. Okay. I asked her what she finds most attractive in a guy. She said, besides all the fact that he has to have a good job, blah, blah, he said quirky. That quirky, that little thing that makes him different from the rest is actually what makes him even attractive as a mate. So that quirkiness or that slight eccentricity, not the extreme, not that you become weirdo. No, not that. That's not it. Okay. That's what makes you creative. That's what gives you your imaginative streak. Okay. That's what makes you interesting. I think you're just another man off the street. You understand, right? That's what makes you a leader that people want to listen to you, because you'll have always a different take on things compared to the regular main street or mainline thinking. You understand, right? And I think it's also in one sense also a sign of comparatively higher intelligence, because only somebody can think out of the box. It's basically how it's called out of the box thinking, right? Okay. Because in the box thinking is you're a bureaucrat. You understand, right? Okay. So as a designer, even as a human being, to be honest, no. And in fact, the term in psychology is called optimal distinctiveness, which means you're distinctive but optimally, not so distinctive that you are out of the box. Right. Your optimal distinctiveness. That makes you more attractive as a boss, as a designer, as a human being, as a potential partner. Every way, that makes you much more interesting. So, and I think that often that is a fond of practically every idea that has come to the human mind from history, throughout history. Because the guys who just think on the beaten track are never going to come up with an off the beaten track idea. So every idea by almost the definition is off the beaten track. You understand, right? Because everything, if you're doing the same thing what was done yesterday, there's nothing. So it's always that slight eccentricity or quirkiness or creativity that actually brings, that makes it interesting. That makes your work interesting. Yeah, and sets you apart, makes you interesting also. Exactly, absolutely right. So, yes. And I think, and often our work is nothing but a reflection of our personalities. You understand, right? Okay. Having said this, remember that I use the word optimal. You don't want to be so off the other extreme end of the pendulum that people want to run away from you all the time, because you are not livable with. You understand, right? That's not going to help either. Okay, that's not going to be helpful either to you or anybody else around you. Okay. Second thing is, to be a leader is why it's important to another entrepreneur. When I use the word leader, it can be entrepreneur, teacher, whatever, parent, whatever. It's also important that your quirkiness, eccentricity, or out of the box thinking should also not alienate people. You understand? Okay. Your job is to be so magnetic enough that people should come towards you. You understand? Right. Yeah. So it's very important to cultivate that charisma. No, it can be cultivated, by the way. Right. It's not always that we are born with natural. Some people are God bless them. But many of things we can acquire it. It takes
Right.
a bit of work, you know. So that's why the best teachers are the ones who students love, and that's because he or she is lovable. So you understand, right? So you need to make yourself lovable, and there are certain things you probably have to do that. You understand, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
only sometimes you do it consciously, because not all of us are natural showmen or naturally charismatic right now. But we have to build it over. But let me tell you myself, I used to be a shy kid when I was 17, 18, 19. You understand, right? Okay. It took me a lot of hard work, conscious hard work, working on, like you said, no, working on myself. You are the Carrera marble out of which you make the David or Moses. Yeah, that is by the sculptures by Michelangelo, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you need to sculpt yourself first, and only then you become a masterpiece. So because God gives you all the tools, the David is in that Carrera marble. But unless a sculptor actually removes all the unnecessary parts, only then the real David will come out. Same thing with yourself. You have it in you. Now you need to remove all the fluff and the unnecessary stuff and all the extraneous things that divert you from being you, so to speak, being your real essential self. You are never going to find the David within that marble that's given to you. So the raw
Yeah.
material is still there. And I think this is true for everybody. Except I might be Michelangelo, you could be David, somebody else could be something else. You know, we have to find what is hidden inside the marble. That is
Right.
our true self, so to speak. You know, so
So that, in some sense, is the process of unlearning, learning,
unlearn. Yeah,
unlearning.
yeah, yes, learning, unlearning,
Right. I
precisely.
also feel we did architecture school for 5 years. After 5 years, I felt like there was a lot of unlearning I really needed to do to
Yeah,
express
true.
again. Right. So I feel sometimes, yeah. So finally, I'd wind up this podcast because I think you are an
You're winding up. I can go on for another couple of hours. Okay,
I'd
okay, go
love
ahead.
to.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
But the final question really would be, how relevant is this phrase anymore today in the world we live? Jack of all trades, master of none. My opinion, it's not as much, because I think because of the world we live in. There's a reason I'm asking someone like you this question, because you're multifaceted. You've been expressing in so many different ways. So what do you think? How would you want to put this?
Okay, let me put it this way. See, either you can be a Renaissance man. A Renaissance man is somebody like Tagore, somebody like Da Vinci. You know, right? Okay. They do multiple things and all of them beautifully. Tagore paint, people not aware. Tagore used to do painting also, by the way. Modern art. Besides writing poems, plays, novels, and being politically active, besides all that, he also used to paint. You understand, right? Okay. Da Vinci, we all know he did everything from designing helicopters to doing sculpture to doing the Mona Lisa, a lot of stuff. And but 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 instinctively, none of us want to. How do I put this to you? None of us want to believe that somebody will be given so many multifarious gifts. You understand, right? Okay, that's why, in fact, it's a crude stereotype. They say, for example, if somebody has good brawn, they think, oh, he probably has less brain. No, but it's actually not necessarily true at all. You can have a lot of brain and you can still build up, go to the gym and build up your body. You understand, right? Okay, or the stereotype of the so-called bimbo. Okay, which is actually not true. You can have beauty and brains. It's
Yeah.
very, very possible. But most, you know what? It's practically a bit of envy on our part on the other side, because they don't want to say, oh, he's got this and this. It seems unfair. You understand,
Right.
right? Okay. Okay. So that's where, so it's very much possible to be the jack of all trades and also be the master of all
Master.
trades.
Yeah.
Yes. But believe me, that's if you work hard to become a master of one trade, you have to work that much harder to become master of two
So
trades,
many
double
other.
harder. Yeah. If you want to become master three, you work three times harder. Look at Elon Musk. He not only runs one of the world's most successful car companies,
Mm-hmm.
he not only sends satellites into space, which in fact no other private company has done it, and successfully, which NASA could not do. By the way, he brought back, including Indian origin astronaut from space. He not only runs something called Neuralink, which basically it's about the human brain and connected to the computers. I'm putting
Mm-hmm.
it crudely here. And he not only runs X, which is X Twitter. You understand, right? Now you would think, and each of them are almost number one in their field.
Mm.
Okay, each of them, not almost, they are number one in the field. And I'm just, and a lot more. This here, other thing called the boring company. It's something, a different version of the metro, which means basically between two cities, they have let's say like a tunnel between two cities, and you have pods, so to speak. running from one place to other. So it's super fast reasons. He's got multiple things happening. So we can see it in our time itself. It is possible for one man to do multiple things. But believe me, that's a lot of hard life. So I'm quoting Elon Musk himself. So a lot of people might disagree with him on his politics. Let's leave that out for a second. But let's look at purely his professional pursuit. For example, when he quit the US government, what that Doge thing last week or whatever, he said, "No, I'm going to go back to my factory floor and sleep on the factory floor, sleep in the conference room, sleep with the workers." You understand, right? You would think, why would the world's richest man? He's got nothing left to prove. He's got nothing left to prove. He's as famous as you can imagine. He's got some of the world's most successful companies at his as his creation. That he started from scratch, not something he inherited from his dad. But then why at the age of, I don't know, 55, 60, I don't know how old he is, 60 plus maybe, he has to go back sleeping on the factory floor. One is because there's work to be done. Second, it's also inspiring to his workers when he tells them, "Bro, you need to work harder. Look at me. I'm willing to do that." And they can't say no, right? They'll get inspired, not because they're getting emotionally blackmailed into doing that, but because they say, "My boss who is willing to do it, I'll also be willing to do that." So that's a lot of work. No, that's a lot of work. It's not easy. I'm not saying, okay, it's a lot of work. Okay, so he just fortunately mastered multiple trades. Now, and let me explain for myself, since I'm not going to be pretentious here. Forgive me if it sounds like that. But the one I work hardest on next to my college is my writing. I've written some 14 books. But you know why I work hardest on that? Because that is one field I've not even published one book. Do you understand, right? So which means that's something I work a lot on. Almost every day. In fact, still it's around 11:30 Indian time here, 11:20. But I sleep at 3 a.m. Indian time. Okay. You know why? Because after 12, if I'm up to it, I'll be working on my books, which none of you even heard much. Because that's for me, that is the thing. And I work probably hard on the books, except for my college. Everything else I work hard on the book, then on my architecture, then on my fashion, then on my art. I work hard on the books because I want to be as good at that as I'm as an architect and as an educator. And that's one thing so far, it's been the laggard, so to speak, in my resume. You understand, right? Okay, so that's it. So, but it's work. So when the rest of the world is sleeping at midnight, I'll be working till 3 a.m. in the morning and waking up at next morning at 8:30 or 9 in the morning. But it's doable. So if you have to be master, you have to work like a master. It's as simple as that. You put in the work. Uh, and of course, a lot of people okay, but I'll end with this small anecdote. But because I do multiple things, when I meet other architects, they introduce me as, but they meet the fashion designer Thomas Abraham. When I'm the fashion crowd, you know what they say? Meet Thomas Abraham, the architect. You understand, right? Okay. So maybe that is in me. Okay. But no, so architects are reluctant to give me the title of architect. Okay. Fashion designers are reluctant to give me the title of fashion. So they think, okay, so whatever. That's fine. That's all right. As far as I'm concerned, that's fine. Finally, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? You judge a tree by its fruit. Okay. And by the grace of God, I've been reasonably successful in that, in my architecture, in my fashion, in my art, all this. So that's what really counts, right? That, and of course, you also know whether you've given your best. So that's probably the best indicator, the evidence, so to speak, of whether you've been able to achieve what you want to achieve. So yeah, but you can do it well. And by the way, I also must mention that to you. So I've often wondered, you're an architect, you're doing color, you're doing this podcast, you're doing multiple things. Okay, and in the meantime, you're also married. That's by so a full-time job by itself. Okay, so okay, so it's a lot of work. So that's juggling a lot of balls. But remember, there are jugglers, and there are jugglers who can go on a long time without dropping one ball. You know that you see it in circus all the time, right? So it's not impossible. But obviously it's much more tougher than carrying just one ball. Most people are happy carrying one ball. Now you have to juggle many balls, but there are you see literally jugglers who do that. Okay, so it's not impossible. That's also a thing to you because I want to tell you that because I know you're doing multiple things and you're almost like you're carpet bombing on many operations. And I think that's very inspirational because I don't think just what you did in college for 4 years or 5 years should determine what you do for the next 60 years of your life. Absolutely. I did 5 years architecture. Now I'm stuck. I have to do only architecture and nothing else for the rest of my life. That's absolutely not true. Because you're going to live with God forbid till you're 80, 90 years old. So why should 4 or 5 years determine what you do for the rest of your life? And it's a varied myriad universe out there with various colors, various things, and so many things, and each of them it's like a buffet. You don't have to have only dal chawal because that's the only thing that you know to make. There's so many things out there. Have a tasting portion of each, and maybe even, maybe one day you can even cook many of them. Because because that's what you enjoy doing, and it also keeps you young. keeps you young at heart, keeps your young mind, but it also keeps your brain very active. You understand, right? The more you do, different because many of these function jobs or activities activate different portions of the brain. You understand, right? Okay. So if you do only one thing, something activate only either the right brain or the left brain or the prefrontal cortex or something else or amygdala, whatever. But if you do multifarious things, okay, your entire brain holistically is working, and I think that's, in my opinion, healthy because it keeps your brain active. You understand? Of
Yeah.
course, you need to get your downtime and you need to get your sleep, etc. Okay, your meditation, whatever. All these are very very important. Prayer, whatever you want to call it. Okay, it's important you have that because it's like going to the gym. You don't nobody gym 7 days a week. You need to
Right.
have rest days, right? Only then your
Resting
body
time.
can recuperate. Yeah, yeah. So you need to do that, of course. But I think it's very inspirational that you actually are going out to do many many things, and I hope my life story will be in some ways a better thing to you also to know that it's possible. And do
Yes.
I think I have achieved everything? No. In fact, let me be honest with you, frankly, and I'm sure almost every so-called successful person thinks it. You hit with uh, troughs of self-doubt all the time, thinking
Mm.
that, oh my God, I'm a failure. You
Mm-hmm.
think in fact, that's actually a success, the sign of a successful man, okay, or a woman. You understand? To think that shit, I could have done more, I've not yet done. Believe me, that as long as you don't let it pull you down, as
Mm-hmm.
long as you use that, oh, I'm a failure as a springboard. Okay, okay, now, okay, that's it. Okay, now I'm feeling. Now let's amend that. Let's
Mm-hmm.
change that. Okay.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, some people who say I'm a failure, then go into a downward spiral, and then they become victims, and they think they're oppressed. The whole world is against them. That then they go into all kind of mental issues. Okay, that's not the way. Okay, and the thing that you have not done enough is very normal. Okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
very normal. In fact, it's even healthy. As
Yeah.
long as it doesn't stop with that. As long as you use that as a starting point to reach the
Go to
next
the
destination.
next. Yes. And
Yes,
I think,
absolutely
like you
right.
said, at the end of the day, we're living a soulful life, right? So I
Yes.
know that if I have to be gone the next moment, no regrets. It's a full
Yeah,
life.
no, yeah, you better. Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no regrets. Okay, but having
Yes.
said that, since I didn't mention this, I also want to mention once again, while your professional life is very, very important, your emotional life, your personal life is probably even more important. Because since you mentioned about when you've gone off, they say it's not an anecdote, it's actually the truth.
Mm-hmm.
When people ask people, when somebody asks someone, anybody on a deathbed, asks them, "Do you have any regrets in your life?" Nobody says, "I wish I could have. I spend more time in the office." You know what they'll say? "I wish I could have. Would have spent more time with my son or my wife or my spouse or my pet, whatever."
Mm-hmm. Right.
Those are very very important. They keep us mammalian, not even just human, because every mammal in the world has a bond with another one of its species. So that love is, I think, probably the defining thing that makes us, so let's not forget that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that relationship that you have, okay, with people whom you love, that's what makes your life complete. That should be paramount. But does it mean that because that you do nothing else except love your kids? And no, no, no. You need to, again, juggle.
Balance it out. Yeah.
It's not easy. I didn't say it's easy. Okay, nobody said it's easy. Okay, you'll always have guilt that why you're not giving enough time to one thing because giving too much to the other. But that's
Mm-hmm.
normal.
Yeah.
Right. But let's not forget that also. That's very very important because that's what finally completes a life. You understand, right? To find that satisfaction in your heart that when you come home, you have somebody to come home to. Do you understand, right? Okay, that's somebody who genuinely is happy to see you. I mean that, okay? Because while your employees will be happy to see you, but to some extent, but believe me, they'll be happy to see their loved ones than to see their bosses. You understand, right? Okay, so that's it. So yeah, I think that's very, very important. I must mention that clearly.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. This was an episode which really took us from concept to culture to actually see
Thank
what
you
a
so
cultural
much.
movement you've made, you've created. It's either through, also because I've worked with you closely, I've seen what goes into, on an everyday basis, what goes into finessing what you bring to the table, to students, to the world.